Welcome, everyone. We're really glad that you're here. It's great to have you with us for another Blue Circle Health cooking class. I'm Scott from Blue Circle Health, and I'm really glad to be hosting today. For those who aren't already familiar with Blue Circle Health, we support adults with type 1 diabetes through a free virtual clinical care education and support program. And a big part of that is creating spaces like this where we can learn, connect, and try something new together. Today, Rita is going to walk us through a delicious stir fry recipe, and I'll share that in the chat in just a moment. And then we'll also send it out afterwards along with the recording. Now, before we jump in, just a couple of quick housekeeping notes. Feel free to use the chat throughout. I'll be keeping an eye on it as we go. This session is being recorded. Participation is completely voluntary, and anything that you share may be visible to others, messages in the chat, for example. And as always, we're not providing any medical advice or endorsing specific brands or products. We always recommend connecting with your personal healthcare team for anything specific to your situation. All right, thanks for your patience with that. Rita, can you maybe introduce yourself and then feel free to take it away?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. So glad to see you all here. So my name's Rita Rubin. I'm a certified diabetes care specialist, and I have worked with folks with diabetes for about 28, 29 years now. And I love teaching cooking classes, so I'm so glad you're here. And we can just jump in again. So yeah, we're going to do a stir fry. And I really designed this class to teach some stir fry basics. So you can take this information to make any kind of mixture of vegetables and protein that you like. But there's some basic rules, or I wouldn't say call them rules, I would say basic recommendations for making stir fry work well. So we'll talk through those today. And the stir fry that I'm making is really simple. We've got some sugar snap peas, red bell pepper, and scallions. Those are the vegetables. And then the protein is tofu, but you can use really any lean protein for this dish. It could be beef or chicken, seafood. Anything would work with this recipe. So it's really, really versatile. So yeah, that's just to start. Let's talk about maybe what you start with a stir fry. And you'll see lots of different recipes recommending different pans. So you always want to think about what kind of pans do you have when you're going to do this. And traditional stir fry is done on really high heat. So when you go out to a restaurant and there's a professional kitchen in there and real woks, I mean, they are just blasting the heat. It is so hot and it cooks in, a nanosecond. But we can't do that in our kitchens at home. It's just that our stoves just don't get that hot. So, but keep in mind that it is high heat cooking. That's kind of what it's supposed to be. So if you have a pan that you can reach a high heat temperature, it is helpful. If you don't, that's okay too. So you may not be doing the high heat traditional stir fry. You might be doing more like a saute, which is still delicious and it turns out perfectly fine. And so I've got a couple of pans that I like to use for stir fry. And one I'm kind of testing out right now is this one right here. Um, it's a carbonized steel pan. So there's an aluminum core and then a steel coating inside and out, and then that is baked at a very high temperature, and it makes it naturally nonstick. It's not a nonstick pan as it has any kind of coating on it or anything like that. There are also nonstick pans that can take high heat. You just want to like look and see like what they're made out of and maybe see if they can take high heat temperature. Most can't take super high heat. So you might be doing just more of a saute if you've got, kind of a regular stir fry skillet or fry pan. My easiest thing to do, and one of my go backs all the time, is to cook at it in cast iron. So this is the most affordable option for cooking, I think, everything. This is a lovely old pan that I have. that I bought. It was pre-seasoned, which means it's already been baked several times with oil to soak into the pores of the metal and give you a nice coating to make it nonstick. And then with age and good care, they become even more nonsticky. So this can be a cast iron skillet is like a go-to for everything. You can do anything in a cast iron skillet. You can see it's got a little stain in it. When I store it, I put oil in it and I just keep it coated. So that keeps the seasoning on it, and it also keeps it from rusting. So that's another option. And stainless steel works really well. You just have to bring it up to a good high temperature before you put oil or anything in it to try to make it more nest. If stuff sticks, it's not the end of the world. Because with stir fry, what you're going to do is, you're going to saute your vegetables and your proteins and things. And then very often you throw in some liquid afterwards. Either it's a sauce that you've mixed or pre-made sauce, or just like today, we're going to use some soy sauce and sesame oil. And that will help to release that bits of food that are on the bottom of the pan most of the time. In chef language, it's called the fond, Fond. And so chefs are very fond of the fond because it brings more flavor into the dish. So if you got that stuck, caramelized ingredients on the bottom of the pan and you add liquid to it and you just, gently stir and pull that up off the pan, it just adds to the flavor. So I would say, first of all, don't stress about what pan you have or don't have. But if you do have a heavy duty pan that can take some heat, it's helpful. The second thing to keep in mind, I think this is actually the most important piece, is that because we're stir frying, it's fast, that you want to have all your ingredients ready ahead of time. And generally, you want to cut your vegetables and your proteins in small bite-sized pieces so that they cook quickly and also that they're easy to eat. So especially if you're using chopsticks, a little bit easier. Think about what size might be easier to grab with a chopstick and put in your mouth and chew. Um, so third thing to think about is what oil you're going to use and how much. And if you have a pan that has a nice non-stick surface, like a well-seasoned cast iron or some other pan, you don't need as much oil as you might need with a pan that maybe is like a stainless steel that's not so naturally non-stick. But you want to have a oil that can take hot temperature, and so we'll be talking about which oils that might include here in a second. So some 3 guidelines to start with. And so let's talk about our recipe and get started. So I'm using tofu, like I said. And when I use tofu for a stir fry, I get a block that's extra firm. And then what I do is I cut it into slabs about index fingers width. Wrap them in towels. This is just some kitchen towels, and usually put a cutting board on top of them, so it helps to um, drain the water out of the tofu. So this tofu I cut up a little while ago, maybe about 30 minutes ago, and I don't know if you can see, but that towel's pretty wet, and that's the tofu, the pieces that I cut. So they're just in slabs. Like I said, about a finger's width wide. And so I'm going to take them out of here, and then I'll cut them into some bite-sized pieces. So with tofu, especially, well, actually with any of the proteins that you're using. So say this was chicken, and I had a chicken breast, and I would do the same thing. I would cut them into like slices about like the width of my finger, and then cut them into bite-sized pieces for the saute. I'd also want to pat those pieces dry, because if we're gonna make these less sticky on the pan and quicker to cook, we just want the proteins and all the ingredients to be pretty dry. Otherwise, they sit there and steam and they don't fry so much. So I just cut my slabs, and now I'm gonna just cut them into smaller pieces about the same size. It doesn't really matter so much with up in my tofu because you're not cooking it like you would cooking meat. You're basically just heating it up and browning it. Uh, but with something like chicken or meat, and you want to make sure all of those pieces are uniformly cooked. Like there's some that are not under. It's important to really try to cook them at about the same space. So that's my tofu, and I'll just set this aside, and we'll come back to that. Um, all right, so veggies. So here's my sugar snap peas. I found these at our local. There's a local farm here that has this lovely little farm stand, and they have these. I think I got the last bag, and I've been making this stir fry for a couple weeks. So I've used all of their sugar snap peas. I think if you don't have sugar snap peas, they're a little bit harder to find. You can find them in a grocery store, but you can use snow peas, and it's essentially the same carb content. And you could also use broccoli. That works really well too. So when I'm cutting these, I'm trying to cut them small-ish, and I'm also cutting them like on the what we call on the bias or at an angle. And because when they're cut on an angle, we're gonna make sure I go to the right side of the cutting board here. Oh, um, you when you cut it at an angle, a couple things happen. One is you get more flavor in the ingredients because there's more surface area exposed. And for the same reason, you get faster cooking. So it's nice to cut things at this angle. And I'm cutting them, bite size, pretty thin. I'm not crazy thin, no. And before I cut the snap peas, I did also snap peas do have a string, so I peeled that little string off too. Here's my snap peas. Again, I'm just gonna make sure I have all my ingredients ready to go before I start cooking. And next, I'll cut up a bell pepper. So here's a cool trick to cut a bell pepper. You could just cut off the stem end here. So you want to cut deep enough so you know you're getting the stem end off. And then you can cut the bottom part off too, like that. And you can make like a little slice in the side. And then I'm cutting along the edge here and I'm just sort of rolling it. So I think you can see that. And I'm removing the seeds, the center part. So taken out. And we have this is relatively seed free. Got a few on there, but no big deal. And then for the other parts, you can just simply cut away the pepper part like that, and throw away the rest of it in your compost if you have. And that's it. So same thing with the pepper. I'll just cut it in bite-sized pieces. I'm not gonna bother do this at an angle because I want a different shape. I'm gonna cut them in little cubes. So you can play with that a lot. Like, how do you want the dish to look? How do you want to cut your veggies? Uh, if you don't like red bell pepper, there's a lot of things you can put in here. So we want like something with like a slightly different texture in here, right? So something with some crunch. And so things that come to mind are jicama. If you guys are familiar with jicama, it's it's not something you normally would think about with a stir fry, having with stir fry, but it really stir fries really well. It's a root vegetable. Looks sort of like a potato, but it's really moist inside, and it has almost like a sweet, nutty kind of flavor to it. So jicama in a stir fry is super good. Uh, Water chestnuts that you just get in a can work really well for some extra crunch. Celery is pretty classic stir fry ingredient for crunch as well. Also, some of you may be wondering if you can use frozen vegetables, and I would say, yeah, you can. There's a trick to it though, because when you think about the frozen veggies, yeah, they're going to be moister, right? When you defrost them, they can be a little soggy. So when you're doing the frozen veggies, one thing you can do is defrost them overnight or for a few hours in the fridge on a baking sheet on top of a kitchen towel, so that the kitchen towel absorbs some of the moisture as the vegetables are thawing. You can do the same thing. You can do a quick defrost uh, in the microwave. So defrost them a little bit and then do the same thing, just dry it off. So yeah, they work just fine if you don't want to do all the chopping or you don't have the fresh stuff available. Frozen works really well. My last ingredient are scallions. Some really beautiful ones again that I got at the little local farm market. So I'm gonna cut these in two parts. I'll cut most of the greens off, and this I'm gonna add later on as like a fresh herb. And then the bottom carrots I'll cut and I'll use as part of the what we call the aromatics in the dish. So part of the base flavorings. And these I will also cut at an angle to really release the flavor really well. So you guys out there, tell me about you. Like what are your stir fry favorites? And do you make them at home? Do you have any questions about stir fry or any stories, good or bad, about stir fry adventures in your own kitchen? Um, you can put them in the chat. You can just let us know. We'd love to hear about it.
We've got a fan of peanut sauce. I would say I'm also a fan of peanut sauce. I'm also going to admit that I've been a little like afraid of stir fry for all of the same things you mentioned before, the high heat, and I don't know if I have the right stuff, and I don't know if, I don't know how to prepare the things and all that kind of stuff. So a good topic.
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
Like there's a right way to do it. And it's basically you're just sauteing a bunch of stuff together. Um now,
Yeah, that's
as long as
a good
it's
way to look at it. Yeah, we've got
yeah.
more comments about being a fan of ginger and liking the spicy, and then loving beef and broccoli. And some stir fry is a question. Some stir fry is really salty. What can we do about that?
Yeah, great question. So yeah. So you can alter your ingredients quite a bit. This recipe uses uh tamari. I'm using which is a wheat tree soy sauce. So you can use a lower sodium brand. And also for a sauce, an optional sauce, I'm going to show you how to do one with chicken broth or vegetable broth. And you can also use low sodium for that. So a lot of the sodium comes from like the things that are added to it. So what's in the sauce, what are the condiments. So you can definitely control for that um, by buying lower sodium options at home. Yeah.
Great, thank
And
you.
speak. Yeah, sure. Let's take a little sip here. And speaking of garlic and ginger, this recipe features a lot of garlic and ginger. Um, More part of the aromatics. So you have onions, garlic, and ginger are major flavor boosters here. And so this recipe is, it's a lot of veggies, but for like, if you're having like just a nice meal, like a 2 or 3 people, it serves like 2 or 3 people basically. It looks like a ton, but it's mostly veg, a larger portion. And because it's so simple, I don't have a crazy sauce to go with it. I want to really flavor things, make sure the base stir fry is really flavorful on its own. So I'm going to put in 3 cloves of garlic and a nice chunk of fresh ginger. And that will be, the major contributor to flavor. And uh, as you can see, what I'm doing is I'm cracking the skin off of the garlic cloves. And then you can get at so you don't have to sit there and peel them. So if you just kind of mush it with a knife, usually it just pops right off. So I've got garlic, and I'm just cutting the garlic into strips. Make sure you can see it. Okay.
Yeah, it looks good. Rita, can you tell us a little bit more? You mentioned about the pan or pans earlier, but there's a question about which pan and knives do you want to look for? What are some tips when you're shopping for some of the kitchen equipment?
Yeah. So again, yeah, good question. So this is a really basic kitchen knife that I always use. You want to keep them sharp, right? So you want a good knife that feels comfortable in your hand. That's a really important thing. Because this is the tool that you're going to use to do a lot of cutting. So it should be something that's comfortable, not too heavy. Um, and then keep it sharp. So you don't have to take it to a knife sharpening service. You don't have to use a stone, though if you have one and you like to use it, that can be a really great way to sharpen a knife. Mm. You can also use a lot of like handy, just at home kitchen tools. Like I have one just for a quick sharpen. This is a chef's choice. It's a two step. There's side one and side two. And you just swipe the knife through the first side and then through the second side, and it really sharpens quite well. So buy a knife that feels comfortable, that you can keep sharp. So, if you can get a good quality one, it's worth it if you're gonna be cooking a lot. Um, as far as pans go, like I said earlier, a basic good pan is just a good cast iron skillet. And you can buy many these days that are pre-seasoned, so you don't have to go through the whole seasoning process on your own, which involves coating the pan with oil inside and out, and then baking it usually at like 350 to 400 for like an hour, and then repeating that process several times. So it's a bit of a time-consuming process to season a pan, but if you get one that's already pre-seasoned, they've already done that work for you, and as long as you take care of it, it should say well seasoned, um,
Can you
for a
talk
long time.
more? Can you talk a little more
Mhm.
about what that means to take care of it? Like it is, does that,
Sure.
yeah, tell us more.
Yeah. So, you wanna when you clean your pan, very often what I do is, if I've been cooking stuff, I'll, usually take a towel and wipe out if I can just kind of wipe out the food and the extra oil, and then, lightly wash it with a little soapy water, like just a light wash, and then reapply some oil before I put it away. That's usually what I do. If you have to scrape at it and use any kind of, uh, like a scouring thing, you'll remove some of that seasoning. So it's usually, when I don't know how many of you have old cast iron skillets in your kitchen, and, tell me what they look like. Because they just look just kind of used. So that's what I do. No, like, no harsh chemicals, no harsh scrubbing, just a gentle cleaning, and then I usually, like I said, I put oil in it and just store it with the oil in it. Um, but yeah, cast iron, and then, carbonized steel is there are some really great products out there now. They tend to be more expensive. Um, but this is a brand called Mason, Misen, I think is what it's called. Um, but you can also get, OXO brands. There's a bunch out there, so you might just look for reviews, like how do these perform under high heat for stir fries? Because you'll see it. You'll see all the reviews. Some are great, some are not so great. And then if you get a nonstick pan, that absolutely can be fine too. So it just might not be able to get it up to quite as high heat. Um, all right, so I'm gonna heat my skillet over here. Whoops, gotta plug it in first. Yep, helps. Um, so the process is gonna be first to heat up the pan. And I wanna make it I'm probably gonna be on, like, medium high heat. This is not my cook stove, so it's a little bit harder for me to manage it just to 'cause, I know how my stove works, that I this is just a little portable thing. So I'm just gonna be checking it just to sort of see where the heat is. I don't want it on super high, scalding, searing. I don't want it super, super high, just kinda medium high. And, and then we're gonna cook our protein first. That's usually the steps that you take in a stir fry is you cook your protein and then you take it out of the pan and then you throw in your vegetables and you cook that later. You cook those later and then you throw the protein back in the pan, and if you're using any additional sauce, then you usually add the sauce then. So that's the typical routine, though there are there are variations in how different recipes have you do things. So oil. So you want an oil with a high smoke point. And what that means is you want an oil that's not going to burn at a low temperature because this is high temperature. So you don't want to use your really nice extra virgin olive oil to stir fry because it will burn. Um, so you want more refined oils. So no cold pressed. Think you want stuff that's been refined, meaning it's been taken up to a higher temperature. A lot of the natural, like, phytochemicals and things like that are out of there. Um, and, uh, and so oils that work well are, refined avocado oil. So this is avocado. You don't want cold pressed avocado. You want the one that says, this one says naturally refined, 500 degrees smoke point. So, so just pay attention because if it's a cold pressed olive bin, it's still got a lot of organic material in there that's going to burn. Um, Another thing that works well is coconut oil. So I'm going to use coconut oil in this recipe because I like the additional flavor. But if you don't like coconut oil flavor, then a neutral oil like avocado, you can also use canola, peanut, safflower oil. Those are all high heat. They can take high heat. And I'm just using coconut oil. So um, it's taking a little while. This is a heavier pan, so it takes a little bit longer to heat up. If you're using
That's
cast
okay.
iron, it'll take even longer. So just so you know. Yeah.
We've got a couple of good questions. So I saw a couple of comments about using
Yeah.
sesame oil. Is sesame oil, in terms of the
Mhm.
smoke point, where does that fall into the range?
If it's refined sesame oil, it's a higher smoke point. So it's gotta be refined. Um, so just wanna look on the label and see.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
And then another
Usually I
great.
use this yep.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say I use sesame oil as a, finishing oil usually. And that's what's gonna happen tonight. We're gonna use a
Aha.
roasted sesame, but
Yeah.
we don't cook with it because it's too fragile.
That's actually probably what our commenters mean is when they're talking about the sesame oil is adding it later. So
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
you're you're probably right on track with that. We've got
Okay.
a good question. Uh, that I want to share. So she says in the past, before getting T1D, she liked to use fresh ginger, garlic, water chestnuts, green and red peppers, celery, and
Mm.
scallions with broccoli. And however, I used to put a bit of low sodium soy sauce and sesame oil and sprinkle a few sesame seeds. Would this
Okay.
still be considered healthy?
Oh my gosh, yeah. Actually, you just described our recipe tonight.
Amazing. Great.
Absolutely. All great ingredient. I love all of those. Certainly. All right, my pan is hot and I'm gonna throw in some tofu. And I can hear it sizzle. So usually if your pan is hot enough, you'll hear initially the sizzle. You don't want to see it like just flash and start burning. But if it starts to sizzle right away, you're at a good temperature. And then immediately the temperature goes down when you put ingredients in it. So it's got to like heat up a little bit. And what I'll do too is when I put in the protein is it can stick. So I like to just shake it around. So make sure it's all covered with oil. I do this with any kind of pan and give it a little shake and we're gonna let that start to yeah.
We've got
Um yeah.
another great question I want to share, asking about bean sprouts. Would bean sprouts make a good ingredient for a recipe like this?
Absolutely. Yeah, and those little guys, they cook fast, so you wanna add those last, towards the end of cooking your veggies. Yeah, but yeah, bean sprouts are great, I love that. Sometimes I forget about bean sprouts, and I think they're great, and, s super good in stir fry. Um, so after you cook your proteins, you're gonna cook your veggies, and so a thing to think about too is which veggies are gonna take longer. And you wanna put those in the pan first. And, so they might be maybe you have veggies that are a little larger cut or that they're harder veggies that are gonna are gonna really, take longer. This is starting to really sizzle that face. Yes. Yes. So all the veggies that we're using tonight are all kind of the same density. There's none that are really any harder than the others. So I'm going to throw them all in together. And but if I had like maybe if I had broccoli, then I would do that first because the broccoli is going to cook a little bit longer, or celery takes a little longer. So that's just another thing to think about is how long those veggies take. The one thing with cast and iron that's really cool that you don't get with some of these other pans is, um, you can get more of a sear from cast. That can be a really nice advantage to stir frying with that material because it can really brown stuff really quickly because it gets hot and it follows the heat really well. So, another bonus cast iron. And, the only thing with a cast iron skillet that I find is hard is it doesn't my skillet doesn't have high sides to it. And so if I'm throwing in a bunch of veggies in here and I'm tossing stuff around, things go flying. Sometimes they go flying anyway, but if I'm trying to keep it all contained, if you have a pan that's got some high sides for a stir fry, that can be really just another thing to consider. You can see that it's starting to brown, right? So it doesn't take too long. And I would not worry about having every side perfectly brown, that you'd be here all night. But generally just having most sides looking like they've got a little color is that's all I'm looking for right now. And so I added, yeah, got
What
question?
if we've got a comment in the chat about adding something like butternut squash or rutabaga that they usually take a bit longer to cook. How might you incorporate those into something like this?
I love that idea of stir fry with those vegetables. Oh my god, that's great. Yeah, they would definitely be first in the pan. Definitely. Like even before maybe you did like some, onions or anything like that, I would put those guys in there first and then really think about your size. Like how big are you cutting it? How thin are the pieces? How thick are the pieces? Because they'll take a little bit longer. I love that. What are you going to put with your rutabagas and your butternut squash? Tell me. It's so creative. And what I think would be good is some onions, some chilies would be really yummy to brighten up that flavor because they're, kind of sweet veggies. So onions and chilies and maybe something green, I would think. Maybe some spinach or um, some scallions. Scallions would work. All right. So that's pretty well ground. I'm gonna go with that. So you guys see that? Okay. I- I'm just gonna toss this in a bowl and we're gonna come back to that tofu later. And so I don't really need to add any oil to this pan. I'm just gonna give it a little bit more. Um, just because the oil sort of get the sauce. I'm gonna put a little bit more coconut oil in there, and then I'm gonna add the veg. I'm gonna throw in some scallions. I don't know if you guys can hear that sizzle. Can you?
I think I've got the magical sound filters turned on too good. I can hear a little bit, but not too much. Yeah. I can picture it in my mind though.
Okay, big sizzles. It's sizzling. And I'm gonna throw in the snow pea or the snap peas and the pepper.
Boy, that looks beautiful with the red of the pepper popping out there.
Beautiful, right? Um, Another thing to think about is try not to overcrowd your pan. Like I've got a lot more veggies, but I don't want to put them in right now because it's just going to make it harder for these guys to cook evenly. So, and I'm just going to put just a pinch of salt in there and a little bit of black pepper just to get that flavor going. And also, I'm going to throw in some crushed red pepper. If you had a nice red or green chili you wanted to add to this for heat, that's great. This I'm gonna use crushed red pepper. And you can omit the heat totally if you want to as well. There and that. So give these guys a little stir. And I'm gonna try to just spread them out on that pan and give them just a couple seconds a couple minutes actually. And after they're cooked, I will add the ginger and the garlic and then put the tofu back in the pan, and then we'll do our little sauce. So it's really simple. So this recipe is really low carb. It doesn't have this particular version of this recipe. It doesn't have a sauce other than the sesame oil and the tamaris. Uh, the sauce that I'll show you how to make if you want to add more sauce and have that nice glaze that you see on stir fries all the time. That has just a little bit more carbohydrate because we're going to use cornstarch. But it didn't add much more carbohydrate per serving. I think it was like 4 grams of carbs per serving or something like that. So it wasn't huge, but it did add just a little bit.
Rita,
Um,
if I'm not as familiar with maybe some of the veggies that I'm using, what do I want to look for as I'm cooking them or deciding what order to put them in the pan, that type of thing?
yeah. So I think I like to think of Scott as like what kind of colors and textures do you want?
Mhm.
As you can see, you've got some nice color here with the green, mostly green and red, but a little bit of white with the onion. So something that, you know, pops. Well, that chili is really strong. Just hit my nose. And then think about like what the texture is. So you want some things that are going to be crunchy. So it, um, and then something maybe a little bit softer. So the onions in here are going to be a little soft. The the bell pepper and the snow peas are going to be a little more crunchy. Just going to try one here. So they're kind of al dente right now.
Yeah.
Um, so that was really quite great. I'm going to throw in the garlic and the ginger. Um, so yeah, so if I wanted something more tender too, I might add some spinach. That would be a really soft texture. And then I did answer the question.
Yeah, absolutely.
And all okay. Um, you could also use if you didn't have fresh ginger. I love the fresh ginger and fresh garlic are my go-tos. But say you just have maybe powdered ginger and garlic, you could do that here too. And maybe add that at the end like this. But be very careful with how much you add because it's going to be a lot stronger flavor and a little different flavor. But if all you have is a little powdered garlic or onion powder, you know, any of those things you can throw in a stir fry. All right. All right. I'm cutting my scallions pretty thin at an angle because this will be more of a garnish than anything in the dish. And give these guys just a little toss here. And now for the sauce. So I just have some tamari. Right there. Where is it? There it is. Oh, actually, wait, forgot. Gotta add my tofu. Getting ahead of myself. So then my tofu back in. Keep that back up. It looks pretty, huh? And now that. And now I'll add the tamari, which is like I said, gluten-free soy sauce. And then the toasted sesame oil goes in next. There.
And that's where you talked about using the sesame oil as more of a finishing oil or a later versus what you would stir fry with.
Exactly. So that is it. That is the stir fry.
That looks beautiful.
Pretty cool, huh? So if I wanted to make a thick sauce, what I would do is add a little slurry of coconut oil and um, cornstarch. I mean, not coconut, chicken stock or vegetable stock and corn. So which I have right here. I'll only do that real quick. Uh, Here we go. So I've got some chicken stock here, and that's salt. We don't want to do that. And some cornstarch. So I'm just adding the cornstarch in, and while I add it, I'm just whisking it so that it blends really well. And since the recipe calls for leaving putting the tamari and the sesame oil in the sauce, if you know you were making the sauce at the time. But I already put it in the pan, so I'm not going to put the sesame oil and the tamari in here. And then I'm just going to add it to the pan. And when it hits the pan, that cornstarch is going to start to change structure. It almost instantaneously gets shiny. You see it?
Yeah.
So I didn't use all of it. You can even keep that in the fridge if I wanted to. I'm going to throw in my scallions. Brighten it up. And let's put it in a bowl and see what it looks like. There it
That
is.
looks
Beautiful
great. And we've
circle.
got some comments about how beautiful it looks and how hungry everyone's getting.
And now I wish you guys could come over for dinner. There we go.
Yeah, that looks
So,
great.
yeah. So really easy, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be complicated. Um, it's good. It's really, really nice. Um,
Yeah.
the garlic and the ginger are just like everywhere here.
Yeah, and you made it. There was some comments in the chat earlier too about how easy you make it look, and I would agree. It's something that, um, you know, I've admittedly shied away from stir fry because it I've always thought it to be much more complicated and more difficult than this. But as always, you make it look so easy.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Yeah, it doesn't have to be complicated. I mean, recipes can make it look complicated, but it's not. And there are also more elaborate sauces that you can find in there that use things like cooking wine and oyster sauce and all sorts of other ingredients. But you can just do pretty simple stuff too.
Yeah, that sounds good. Well, at this point, let's start thinking about what we wanna cook next. And you had some good ideas. We're looking at maybe some broader categories. So, like thinking about breakfast foods, maybe gluten-free grains, or you had an idea for demonstrating a cauliflower crust homemade pizza, and that all sounds good too. So let us know in the chat if any of those options sound good or what you would like us to teach next. And um, let's see, this is July, so it'll be I think November before our next class comes up.
Oh my
Which
gosh, that's
I know
crazy.
it sounds so far away, but it'll be here before we know it. And that's partially our fault. We're keeping Rita so busy taking care of people with diabetes. So we can't get the joy of watching her cooking classes every month like we used to. But please let us know in the chat if any of those options sound good. So again, breakfast, gluten-free grains, or cauliflower crust pizza. You can also feel free to share those. There'll be a little survey that pops up depending on how you joined, of course. But Rita, as always, thank you so much. We always enjoy spending time with you and learning another amazing recipe. So thank you so much. Folks,
Likewise. Good to be here.
if you'd like to see what else is coming up, you can head over to bluecirclehealth.org/events to explore upcoming sessions and register. We've got a good mix of group sessions, webinars, podcast episodes, and more on the way. And as always, we really appreciate your feedback. So um, let Rita and I know what you'd like to see next, and we'll make sure to take care of that for you, and it'll help us make these even better. So, thanks again for being here, Rita. Thank you as always. It's always amazing to learn a good lesson from you.
Good to be here. Thank you. Thanks for
Sounds good.
joining, everybody.
All right, take care, everyone, and we'll see you next time.